Good evening, everybody. My name is Stephanie Goldstein with Generations Health Education. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for our program, Cruise Through Caregiving with Jennifer L. FitzPatrick. We are so grateful to have Artis Senior Living of Potomac sponsoring this evening's event. And in a few minutes, we'll be hearing from them so you can learn more about their community. First, I just want to go over a little bit of housekeeping. For this evening's program, everybody is muted, and that is just to eliminate any background noises. However, the program is designed to be interactive, so please feel free to chat in the chat section any questions or comments that you have for Jennifer throughout the program. She's great about keeping up with the comments and questions. If you're not familiar with Zoom, in order to find the chat feature, you're going to scroll across the bottom of your screen and you'll see a little box that says chat. Just click on that and you can type in any questions or comments that you have for Jennifer. Okay, I want to again thank Artis Senior Living of Potomac for sponsoring this evening's event. And I would like to use this as the opportunity to invite Max Banderengo to come on and welcome you as well and provide a little bit of information about their community.
Thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. As Stephanie mentioned, I wanted to take this opportunity as your co-host to tell you a little bit about our new memory care community, Artis Senior Living of Potomac. We will be opening in the early fall of this year across the road from Congressional Country Club at 8301 River Road, Bethesda, Maryland. At Artis, we believe every one of our residents are unique, and we strive to help encourage building and maintaining relationships with our residents, their families, and our team. We value the uniqueness of every individual and tailor our care to each individual member of our community. We have in attendance this evening our Executive Director, Ruben Rosenfeld, and our new Director of Marketing, Heather McClarty. If you are a family member interested in learning more about our memory care community, we'll put our contact information in the chat, and please feel free to reach out to us at any time. At this time, I'd like to pass it back to Stephanie so we can get the program started.
Thanks so much for that information, Max. And again, please don't hesitate to use the chat feature. Everything you type in is confidential, so the only ones that will be seeing it are myself, Jennifer, and Max, and that's just to protect your privacy. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Are you stressed out as a caregiver? Do you want to figure out ways to reduce your stress? If you answered yes to either of these questions, you are in the right place. Our presenter today is the author of Cruising Through Caregiving, Reducing the Stress of Caring for Your Loved One, and a longtime gerontology instructor at Johns Hopkins University Certificate on Aging program. She has also been featured in national media such as CBS, ABC, Forbes, Reader's Digest, and SiriusXM. When she's not speaking and writing about healthcare, she can be found trying to resist the drive-thru at Chick-fil-A. Please help me welcome Jennifer L. FitzPatrick, MSW, LCSW-C, CSP.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you again to Artis Senior Living. We are so excited to partner with them once again and so excited about their new community in Potomac, Bethesda. It's going to be fantastic. Tonight, though, is all about you, the family caregiver, you who are taking care of a loved one who has Alzheimer's, Lewy body, frontotemporal dementia, or any of the other types of dementia. Tonight's all about you. And Stephanie said, please feel free to write in at any point in the comment section. If you have a question, if you have something that you're dying to ask an expert or you want to ask Artis, feel free to write in at any point. We want this to be as useful to you and as helpful to you in your journey as caregiving as it possibly can be. So when I first wrote Cruising Through Caregiving, there were a lot of people that said, cruising, what are you talking about? And I intentionally wrote Cruising Through Caregiving and made the title a little bit provocative because my theory was caregiving is never a vacation. Dementia caregiving in particular is never going to be a vacation, but if you are intentional about it, you can cruise more smoothly through the process. You can have a smoother time as you take care of your loved one. It's never gonna be easy. It's never gonna be without its challenges. But if you're intentional and if you follow a few simple concepts, you can make it easier and more manageable for yourself. So what I want to invite everybody to do in the chat section right now is I want you to think about your life today with anything that's causing you stress, whether it's caring for your loved one, whether it's your job, whether it's having to homeschool your kids, whether it's financial issues, whether it's your own health. And I want you to think, where would you put your stress? So 100 would be you can't deal with another stressful event or you feel like you're going to lose it, or 0, that maybe you're on some really powerful medication and you're feeling no stress. So, and if you say around 50, maybe in the middle, that you're dealing with some stress, but you're managing it. So I want everybody to feel free to write in, where would you put your stress level today? Where would you put your stress level today? And we already got some folks writing in 60, okay? If any, 70, 50. Sometimes people will say, really, I can go. I feel like I'm at a 200. Okay, we've got 85, we've got 90, 75. Okay, so I've been teaching college for the last 20 years. And to me, a 60 is a D, a 70 is a C, an 80 is a B. And so if you are under a 70, that is just passing, right? That or a 60, a D would be passing, but it's still not great. If you're between a 60 and 70, you're teetering on the borderline. If you're under 60, you need to consider what actions you can take. I'm sorry, if you're over a 60, if you're over, sorry, let me start out for a second. It's a little bit late in the day. But if you're over 60 or over 70, you really need to be considering what small action are you going to take to change your stress level, to move that stress level down. If you're at 75, as someone just wrote in, what can we do in the next week or so to get to a 65 or get to a 50 within the next month so you can reduce your stress level? So the suggestions that I'm going to make this evening are some simple ways, some simple ideas that you can embrace to cruise more smoothly through caregiving. And the first one is choose. We want everybody to think about caregiving as something that they are choosing to do. I want to help you to reframe it, to think about caregiving as something that you've made a choice to do. The R standing for recruit. We want you to recruit people to be part of your caregiving crew. Understand. We want you to understand your loved one's condition. I for integrate. We want you to integrate caregiving into your life. Caregiving should not be your entire life. The senior care system. I know we have a lot of professionals on tonight, which is terrific. We have some different types of organizations represented, but the senior care system includes Artis Senior Living. It includes home care agencies, care managers, elder law attorneys, Area Agency on Aging, the Alzheimer's Association. You probably are going to need something from one of them or more of them at some point if you're not already utilizing a service in the senior care system. But what we want you to do is with the senior care system, we want you to partner with them. And then E would be expect to course correct. So obviously the metaphor I use in Cruising Through Caregiving is we're on a voyage, we're on a boat. And when you're on a boat, sometimes the weather gets rough, you want to course correct, you want to change your course. So let's jump in. So for C, for choose. Many people get very, very upset viscerally when I say, caregiving is a choice. And so many people, and I'm sure there's many of you on this program tonight saying, oh, no, it's not. I'm the only one. I have to be. I'm the only daughter. Or it's my husband. What do you expect me to do? Just not take care of him? But I think deep down that there are a lot of older adults out there who have dementia that have nobody caring for them, that nobody is looking after them. And you might know people like that, maybe a neighbor, maybe you have friends that don't have a loved one that's looking after them if they become ill. So Stephanie, Max, if we've worked in this field for a while, we've all encountered somebody who does not have a caregiver. And so sometimes it helps to reframe and say, okay, even though this isn't hard, even though I feel like I have to do this, I am making a choice. People abandon their loved ones all the time or do barely anything, do the bare minimum. You might even have someone in your life. Maybe there's that sister that lives in California that never helps, or maybe you have a niece that you're taking care of your sister and that niece lives locally and she hardly ever does anything for her mom. So you know that there are people who opt out of caregiving. I want you to remind yourself that you're already doing a great thing by just being your loved one's caregiver, and reframe it. Remind yourself that you're choosing. So another example might be, some days when you might want to eat a whole bunch of junk food and you say to yourself, I'm choosing to eat a salad because I want to eat healthfully, or I want to lose a few pounds. When we look at something as a choice, a lot of times it seems more manageable, more doable. Recruit. So there is an exercise in Cruising Through Caregiving that is called the MET exercise. And this is an exercise that I'm going to talk you through it a little bit this evening, but I'm going to send to Max so he can send to all of you the MET exercise worksheet. It's right out of the book. It's in a Word doc. But a lot of times in caregiving, people say, I'm the only one. I'm the only kid. I'm the only friend. I'm the spouse. I have to do it all. And we really never want it to be one person. We want you to recruit other people to your caregiving crew, even if you don't think that there's anybody else. And we'll talk a little bit about how the MET exercise can help you with that. Ideally, in a caregiving scenario, we want there to be a crew. We want there to be a captain of the caregiving ship. So if you've ever been on a cruise, or you've ever been on any kind of pleasure boat, or any kind of boat whatsoever, you know that there really can only be one captain. And that person makes the decisions about where the boat's going to go, should the boat even leave the dock. They make all the decisions about what happens with the boat. And this person is to delegate. We see a lot of spouses or adult kids say, okay, I'm the caregiver. And we want them to not just be a caregiver, we want them to be a delegator. Much like if you have ever stayed in a hotel, and I know Max came from the hospitality industry. If you've ever stayed at a hotel, the hotel manager does not do everything. We don't want the hotel manager serving coffee in the morning. We don't want them to check you in when you get to the hotel. We don't want them to be vacuuming the carpets. Now, a good hotel manager is going to know how to do those things and fill in if someone can't make it. But we would think something was very wrong at the hotel if just one person was doing everything. But yet in caregiving, so often we just assume that one person can do all of these different duties: managing money, taking the person to the doctor, helping the person in the bathroom, spending time with the person, listening to their stories if they're repeating. I'm wondering if there's anybody on this program that has a loved one who repeats a lot. And that happens to so many people who have dementia. So we want one captain, one primary caregiver. And so we also would like to have at least two first mates. So my husband and I boat, and I talk a little bit about that in Cruising Through Caregiving as I go through the boating metaphor. And in Cruising Through Caregiving, or in the caregiving, the crew world, in the boating world, if you're a first mate, you are somebody that supports that captain. And if you're going to tie up at a dock, you're able to help him or her. If you're going to be, if somebody gets injured, you're going to go grab the first aid kit. And if you're going to be on the lookout if weather is changing, wind is changing, and alert the captain. And this is what we want you to have: at least one or two people that are going to be your seconds. And so if you're maybe the spouse, maybe you're the husband, and your spouse has Alzheimer's disease, and most of the time you're going to take your spouse to the doctor. But right now, maybe you can't, maybe you don't feel well. And we know that, if you're not feeling well, especially right now with COVID and everything, you don't want to leave your house, right? Maybe you have a son or a daughter who's a secondary caregiver that can fill in and help. But also maybe you have a nephew that lives locally that can help also. Maybe the nephew comes over periodically and walks with your spouse while maybe you go to the grocery store. And so you've got some other people, at least one or two other people in the family, friend, faith community, neighbor network that's going to be able to also do some direct help with your loved one. Ideally, beyond that, we want to have a bunch of tertiary caregivers, dock hands. So anybody who's ever docked a boat, any captain, will tell you many captains can just dock a boat and it's no problem. They got it. But they will tell you, especially if the weather's lousy, having a first mate is so helpful. And then having a dock hand when you get to the marina, when you get to the dock. If you've ever seen the television show on Bravo, Below Deck, you will see that docking a ship can be very tough work. And they're always very grateful when there's people on the dock that can help pull the boat in. And so the dock hands or the tertiary caregivers, we want to have several of them, maybe a half dozen, maybe a dozen. And an example of this person might be that they order your groceries for you and your loved one online. Or one example that I love is I had a colleague years ago tell me that periodically she would fly into the city where her parents lived. And she was what we would call a first mate or a secondary caregiver. She would give her sibling a break. She'd fly into the city where her parents were. And it was getting really expensive. And she would be taking time off of work. She'd come in every couple of months and spend 4 or 5 days with her parents, give her sibling a break. And one of her parents' friends said, hey, you know what? I know you're flying in. It's expensive. You're taking time off of work. But when you get to town, let us pick you up in one of our cars and we'll leave you our car for the time you're in town. You can borrow our vehicle. What a beautiful way to lend a hand. And the great part about that was these friends of her parents, they were elderly themselves. They weren't going to be able to take her parents to the doctor. They weren't going to be able maybe even to stay with her mom and dad if she needed to go pick up a prescription or run an errand. But this is something they could do. They could lend their vehicle. Other ways that tertiary caregivers sometimes help is maybe they give a phone call once in a while to talk to you, to check in, to see how you're doing. Or maybe they're going to send you a gift card for DoorDash so you can order a meal once in a while. There are a lot of ways that people can contribute without doing direct care for your loved one. And remember, a lot of people in your life want to help. When somebody has a new baby, for example, everybody knows what to do. Everybody throws a baby shower, they make offers to babysit, they drop off meals, they drop off cute little outfits and presents. When somebody has a loved one who has cognitive impairment, the general public does not know what to do. But when we let others know that we're open to their help, people in our friend, family, neighbors, faith community, you will probably be very surprised how many people step up to the plate. So what I'd like to ask everybody to do with this poll, and Stephanie's going to pull up a poll, and I want to ask you to click on A, B, or C. Which crewmate do you most identify as? Which one sounds like you? Captain, first mate, dockhand. Oh, okay, great. So about half of you said you're a captain, about a third of you said you're a first mate. And I love this. We've got 18% that say that they're a dockhands. And I just love that some of the dockhands are on, because a lot of times the dockhand's job and the first mate's job can be really, really tough because they don't want to overstep on the captain. Sometimes they want to be asked by the captain. And so I'm so glad that we have a nice mix of folks on here. And feel free to write in any comments, any questions at all. So for a captain, if you are the captain, if you are the primary caregiver, informing your crew, you want to ask the right person for the right thing. If I'm on your list, if you go through the MET exercise in Cruising Through Caregiving, and it's a very quick exercise that you can do that will help you figure out who, even if you think there's nobody can help you, you're going to look at that list and think, who is the right person? If I would love it if someone would drop off a meal 3 times a week, who would be the right people? Now, if I'm on your list, you don't want to ask me, unless you want it to be something that I bought from Panera or Chipotle or something like that. If you're looking for a homemade lasagna, I'm not your person. But I am somebody that you could put on your crew that's, for example, hang out with your mom while you go get your nails done, or spend some time with your wife while you go to your own doctor's appointment. So you want to be asking the right person for the right thing. So the MET exercise, I'm just going to walk you through it really quickly. And again, I'm going to have give Max the handout in case you would like to print this out. It's a really easy exercise, and it starts with setting a timer for 5 minutes on your cell phone. And you want to write a list, emptying your mind of every task that's stressing you out. And I want somebody to just write in one task that's stressing them out. It doesn't necessarily have to do with caregiving, just one task that's stressing you out right now. Is it mowing your lawn? Is it helping your kids with their homework? Is it that you need to up your internet because you and your spouse are fighting over the internet because everybody's working from home? One task that is stressing you out right now. Maybe it's that your mom is wandering and you're really scared that she's going to hurt herself. So just one task. Doing laundry, yeah. Moving to a new house could be, yeah. So anything that's stressing you out. Okay, people are still writing in. Doing your taxes, yeah, for sure. You want to label that the need help with list. And I don't want you to screen or censor yourself, write anything that's stressing you out, being 2,000 miles away from your loved one. So label that the need help with list. And then the second part is I want you to set the timer for 2 minutes, and without thinking about age, money, where the person lives, I want you to write 20 people who care about you. Do not limit yourself to your immediate family or your neighbors. I want you to think big. Anybody that you know who cares about you. People are saying cleaning. I know that's a big one. The step 3 is setting the timer again for 2 minutes. And again, without regard for age, finances, geography. 20 people who care about your loved ones. So maybe you are the family care, you're the primary, you're the captain of the caregiving ship, and you've already written a list of who cares about you, and your spouse is the person that you're caring for. I want you to go through this exercise again. And it might be that you're going to write down some people twice. That, okay, yep, you have a grandson that you both share, and he's on that list twice. Friends, family, faith community, acquaintances, anybody that colleagues, anybody that cares about you or cares about your loved one. And then you are going to label that list the possible helpers list. And then lastly, you're going to look at how do you match them up? And what can be a really effective exercise is maybe you don't do the matching. Hand it to your best friend. Hand it to your daughter and say, you know these people. Who do you think would be a good fit for this? Now, and for a lot of us, a secondary caregiver is the perfect person to start making calls or start emailing or texting and saying, look, my mother is finally ready for a little bit of help. I knew you've offered help previously. Here's some things that she could use help with. Are you willing? And there are lots of terrific websites like Lots of Helping Hands and CareBridge, and there's many others. And if anybody has any that they've used where they can coordinate all that, feel free to write it in the chat section. You can do it on a website. You could do it via email. You could have someone ask the possible helpers on the list, but think about who'd be willing to do what. And for family caregivers who are the primaries, some people on that list maybe are not going to be able to help your husband in the bathroom when you need a break. That just might, but somebody on that list might be willing to pay for an aide 3 hours a week, or to look up assisted living communities and set up virtual tours for you for when you're ready to place your husband. Or somebody on that list might live in a different state or even a different country and be able to do the research to determine which elder law attorney might be the best fit to help you, or to help you find a support group. Maybe you just need somebody with tech skills. Now, I know that you've probably all had the experience, if you've ever been courageous enough to ask for help. Emptying out the house to sell. Yeah, that's another great example. But if you've been courageous enough to ask somebody for help, you've probably had the situation which has been the person says, oh yeah, let me know what you need. And then you ask them for something and then they don't follow through. That happens. That will happen. Some people are just not going to follow through. But I tell you, if you put the energy out there and you do this 20-minute exercise and you make it known to the people that care about you and the people that care about your loved one that you are willing to accept help, someone's going to step up. And I think you're going to be surprised by the energy out there. Someone's going to hear of your need. You're going to start, when you get into that receiving mode, I think you're going to be really surprised with what starts to show up, because maybe you've got that stepsister in another state that's not helping with your stepfather, and that's going to happen. But maybe all of a sudden a neighbor that you hardly ever talk to says to you, you know what? I just heard that you have a parent with dementia. I had a parent with dementia. Can I help? What can I do? I have a lot of experience with this. And you can pull out your list and you can let that person know what you're willing to accept help with. Now, there are going to be tasks that you're going to say, no, I don't want anyone else to do it. I don't want anybody else helping my wife in the bathroom. I don't want anybody else taking my mom to the doctor. I need to be the one to do all of that. But there are tasks that you can delegate. I promise you, there are tasks that you can delegate. So for those of you who are maybe thinking that you're feeling a little resistant to this concept, that, you know what, I don't want to bother anybody. I'm like that. I have a really hard time asking for help. But I want you to consider this story about my best friend, Megan. And my best friend, Megan, several years ago, she's my age, we're both 47, and she had her baby. She got pregnant. She and her husband had been married 21 years at that point, and they were super excited to finally be pregnant, having a baby. And when she announced that she was pregnant, I said, oh, I want to throw the shower. I'm your best friend. I'm going to throw the shower. And I started looking at places where I wanted to have her baby shower. And I decided on the place and the date and everything like that. And slowly but surely, her sister and her two sisters-in-law, actually 3 of her sisters-in-law, reached out to me and said, what can I do? What can I bring? Do you need any help? And then some of our mutual friends started to say, what can I do? My first inclination was, I have it under control. You don't need to do anything. I'm hosting it. I found a place. It's all set. And I took a moment and I thought about the advice that I give in Cruising Through Caregiving. I'm serious. And this is after I wrote the book. And this is this joyous experience. Why would I exclude her family and friends? Who am I to exclude them? They want to share in her joy. And so one sister-in-law did the favors, which was great because I wasn't even thinking about favors. Another sister-in-law figured out the best bakery in the area where she could get a really amazing cake. Another friend said, let me be in charge of decorations. And she was all over Pinterest, finding the best kinds of decor. And I have to tell you, not only did it make my life easier, because it really did, but Megan's joy on the day of the baby shower And afterward, then when she saw all these different people that loved her came together, was just so remarkable. And I thought, gosh, I'm so glad that I didn't shut people out. Now, I know that caregiving for a loved one dementia is not a joyous experience most of the time. It's very, very exhausting, very hard, very taxing. But I have to tell you, it's similar, because there are people who love you and love your loved one who want to feel like they're contributing. They want to feel like they're doing something. And if you've already told them no, then they might not ask again, because there may have been a point where they asked if they could help and you really were okay. Maybe things were under control. But if things have changed and you are willing to accept help, it's so important to not just say, yes, I'll accept help, but here are some things that I could use help with. Are any of them something that you'd be willing to step up to do? And I keep going back to my colleague whose parents' friends who were elderly offered their car. She said it was a huge help to her, but it made her parents' friends feel so good, like they were doing something. Picking her up from the airport and letting her have the car. Okay, so I got a little bit of a comment. Okay, all right, so we've got a comment that somebody is suggesting some studies that caregivers might like to look at with yes, vitamin deficiencies can mimic dementia. Absolutely, very, very, very true. And those are some really great, absolutely, and that's true. We want to make sure that if you believe that your loved one has Alzheimer's or another type of dementia, that they do have that proper diagnosis, and that we know that it's not depression, that it's not delirium related to a urinary tract infection, that it's not a vitamin deficiency. So thank you to the person that just wrote that in. So the next part is to understand your loved one's condition. When we understand what's going on with our loved one, if they have diabetes, if they have heart disease, if they have Alzheimer's, once we understand what's going on with that person, we're able to better help them. And so one of the big areas where we see a lack of understanding is when a loved one is repeating. And so I'm going to share the story of Mary and Jim. Mary, for many months actually a couple years, was taking care of Jim, who had an advanced dementia. And Mary's husband, Jim, she and Jim had been married about 12 years, and it was a second marriage for both of them. And Jim, they had 10 great years, and then Jim was diagnosed with dementia. And it got to a point where Jim was constantly repeating the same comments, the same stories over and over and over again. And Mary found this tremendously frustrating, as I'm sure you all do if your loved one does this, which so many people with dementia do. And this particular situation it was the middle of winter, and Jim started to every single night say to Mary, over and over again, we've got to start planning the 4th of July party. And Mary would say, oh no, it's winter, look outside, it's snowing, it's not 4th of July. And he would say, yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. They would go back and forth, and they were getting involved in a little bit of a power struggle. And he would constantly bring it up, and she would try to reason with him. And eventually, it just got to the point where Mary started really becoming very, very impatient and said, not only is it winter, but that's a party that you and your first wife used to have. And understandably, Mary was feeling very upset that evidently Jim had stuff that he used to do with his first wife on his mind, and not as much maybe with Mary on his mind. And they wound up really getting into an altercation, and Jim stood up and started yelling over her, and Mary ran out of the room and called her daughter, not their daughter, but her daughter, because again, it was a second marriage. And she explained what happened and how scared she was, and she couldn't take the way Jim was behaving. And the daughter says to Mary, Mom, I've always liked Jim, but it seems to me that you're in a domestic violence situation. How tragic. It wasn't a domestic violence situation. Jim had never harmed Mary. He had never harmed anybody. It was his condition. Mary was trying to reason with him and be rational and show him snow and say, look, we just went out for a walk and it was cold, and remind him that she was his second wife and that they've never had a 4th of July party. And if she understood that this was a big part of this disease of his dementia, and she was able to handle that and react to it in a way that would be more effective, then Jim wouldn't have become so upset and angry and agitated. Can you think of any ways that that Mary could have responded a little bit differently to this? Could Mary have done anything else if she understood the conditions? What might she have said? What might she have done to have a different experience, and that this didn't happen, that Jim didn't become so upset? And feel free to write in any comments, any questions at all. But if you have a thought about how Mary might have approached it a little bit differently. So if you have any thoughts on how Mary might have approached it differently in a way that understood her loved one's condition, Jim's condition. Well, one might be to simply talk about 4th of July. That could be one way. Or say, oh, maybe go along with it and say, oh, who would you like to invite to a 4th of July party? Maybe look at old photographs of a 4th of July party. Talk about what they love about the 4th of July. All of those are great ways to better understand and relate to your loved one. But that said, even if you get it rationally, you know that you shouldn't argue with your husband or your mom, and you know that she can't reason. Sometimes you still get into a power struggle because you're human and you're tired and you're frustrated. And what Mary and I wound up talking about is that it was time for her to get her med exercise out, bring friends, bring family, bring neighbors into the fold. Or if she didn't feel like that was going to be enough, maybe bringing home care into the home, maybe looking at senior living. It was, to me, because Mary had been to lots of support groups and she was reading a lot of books trying to understand her loved one's condition. She just wasn't able to apply it. And so the more we understand our loved one's condition, the less stress that we have, and if we're able to apply it. Integrate caregiving into your life. Integrate caregiving into your life. If caregiving is the only thing you have in your life, then you're going to be burnout. You're going to have a really tough time. You have to have other pursuits, whether it's friends, whether it's your spirituality, whether it's hobbies or work. Caregiving can be a big part of your life, but if it's the only part of your life, you are going to be overcome with stress. And in order to cruise more smoothly through the caregiving process, you want it integrated into your life. You want it to be part of your life. And that's oftentimes why bringing help into the home, doing that exercise, or even making the transition to senior living, you can get back some of your life and not just be a caregiver to your loved one anymore. The senior care system is imperfect. We want you to accept good enough. It's never going to be perfect. So while Artis Senior Living is a great organization, they're never going to be perfect. No senior living community will be perfect. No home care agency will be perfect. No hospice, no adult daycare, no doctor's office is going to be perfect. But the odds are you are going to need something from them at some point. And so the goal should be to partner with them, find the right fit, do your research early before you need help. Look at the communities in your area, because even if you're that person that says, I'm never going to place my loved one will stay home with me forever. it's very likely that you will need help at some point, that whatever you're going through right now. So do your research. And this is one of the tasks that somebody on that MET exercise list can do for you, that someone on that list is going to be able to do research, that they're going to be able to make phone calls, they're going to be able to do internet research, they're going to be able to set up in-person or virtual appointments to services that might be a good fit for you. Now, Nancy Reagan, who maybe is the most famous first Alzheimer's caregiver in our country, wife of former President Ronald Reagan, was very famously quoted for saying to many sources that she would never move President Reagan out of their home, and she was never going to do that, and she was never going to bring in help, and she was going to take care of everything. And I think it's really important to remember that Mrs. Reagan had something that most of us don't have, and I'm not just talking about money. She actually had the Secret Service at her house. She had doctors that would be on call and come in and take care of the president. But most of us are not going to have that automatic setup, and we're going to need to do our research, and we want to strive to be true partners, that we are not just the recipients of the care from a senior living community or a home care agency, that we want to let them know what's important to us and do the research to make sure it's a good fit. And again, going back to the MET exercise, that's a task that you can assign. That's not something that you maybe have to be the one to do that initial research. What if they do not want a caregiver in the home? Okay, so can you speak to long-term care insurance? So the long-term care insurance question, can you be specific? I can answer general questions, but probably not as specific, really specific ones. But if you want to give us more specific, but I'm going to talk about the if they don't want a caregiver in the home question. Okay, if your loved one has advanced dementia, you are the decision maker now, all right? So when someone's in the very early stage, or someone in that family, friend, some power of attorney and or guardian, most of the time it's the power of attorney or next of kin, has to start making the decisions. And so if your loved one has advanced dementia that the doctors are saying, yep, he's in the mid stages, and dad's saying, nope, I don't want any aides in the home, I won't have that. We have to remember that we do not want someone who has an advanced cognitive brain condition making big decisions. So when somebody says that they don't want a caregiver in the home, sometimes there's a lot of strategies that we can use. For one, and again, when the person's in the early stages, if they are not declared incapacitated, if they're still decisional, they still are able to do a lot on their own, it's a little different. But once power of attorney, medical power of attorney is in play, then you or someone else on that caregiving crew needs to be making those decisions. So nobody is, I mean, I personally have never worked with anybody who's like, yep, I'm dying to have a family or a paid caregiver in the home, or I'm so excited to move to senior living or nursing home. Most of the time, that's not how it goes. It's typically because of need, and someone in the family network is saying this is something that needs to have happen. So for one, you might bring in that caregiving aide to the home, and that person is positioned as a housekeeper or a friend of yours, that you don't necessarily say, Dad, this is going to be Mary, your home care aide. This is Mary. She's coming over for coffee, and you be with them for the first couple of days. And then maybe you say, I'm going to run out to the store, or I'm going to go, maybe you go upstairs for an hour and do something that you want to do, take a shower. And so sometimes you position, a lot of times when we use language like Mom, Dad, this is your aide now, or this person's coming to take care of you, sometimes introducing that person, just, this is Mary, and you let them them assume, okay, she's a friend, she's here as somebody that's housekeeping, or she's here to help me out. But whatever it might be, whether it's assisted living, whether it's adult day, whether it's having an aide in the home, there is almost always an adjustment, and it doesn't happen in one day most of the time. It might be that they get mad, they tell the person to leave, but it's a matter of that person. We want that person to hang in, and a good experienced aide is going to know how to do that, that they're going to know how to communicate with, that person who has dementia. So that's something that you want to be looking at. What is the training that those aides have with someone who doesn't want an aide or a caregiver to come in the home? The other thing that I would say, Deborah, is that you want to be really careful about your and you and the other people in your caregiving crew, very mindful of your body language and your energy, because sometimes we tense up when we're saying, I think it's time for an aide, and that energy, that body language is really saying something to your husband or your dad, and it's making them upset, making them uncomfortable if they sense that you're not totally on board with the idea, or if you feel nervous about the idea. Moods are contagious to people who have dementia. When you're a little bit looser and calmer, oftentimes that's going to be what is catching to your loved one. But this is not unusual. And with assisted living, with home care, with adult day, it's not unusual. I think a big mistake, especially with advanced dementia, is to try to have a long, rational conversation, because for one, the person forgets. And for two, a lot of times their ability to reason and rationalize is going to be diminished. So if anybody has any follow-up questions to that question, feel free to write in comments, questions, thoughts about that. So the senior care system is imperfect. You want to search for the one that's going to be good fit, that's going to be good enough for you, and strive to be their partner. And the last one for CRUISE is expect to need to course correct. So I'm guessing, statistically speaking, there's at least one person on this program tonight that's saying all this is fine, but everything is going okay. Nothing's wrong. Everything's smooth. We're kind of cruising. That's great. But Alzheimer's disease, Lewy body, frontotemporal dementia, vascular dementia, all of these conditions are progressive and frequently last many years. And so things might be going great today. Your loved one is happy at home, you have a routine, things are going really well, but that might not be the case in 3 months or 6 months or 2 years. And so know that whatever your plan is for you and your loved one, it needs to be adjustable. And just to give you an example, I around the holidays, and I'm sure Max has experienced this, and all of you professionals who have been on, families will say, well, should I bring my mom who has dementia to the big Thanksgiving dinner? And my answer is, what is the past tell you? Does she do well in crowds? How often does she see the family? Is the house that she's going to familiar? And I always say, if you want, you can try, but have a backup plan. Be ready to course correct. If mom starts yelling in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner, I think it's reasonable for you to get up and either go back to the hotel or go back home, or maybe go take her into another room so she can take a rest, and maybe you can eat in another room together. To have a backup plan, to be prepared to course correct, because you just don't know how it's going to go. And for some people, I've worked with so many families, and I know all the professionals on here this evening have as well, where I'm never moving my mom, I'm never letting strangers in the house, and that's fine. And sometimes it works out. Sometimes it's okay. But more often than not, it does not work out, because not only is it exhausting psychologically that you have to keep repeating that, no, I'm your second wife. No, it's you don't want to have to be in that position where you're going a little crazy because you can't handle that your loved one thinks it's 4th of July when it's January. But it's also physically taxing, because that person's body is on the decline. Their brain is not communicating anymore and saying, telling that person when they're thirsty, when they're tired, when they're hungry. they're going to the bathroom. Oftentimes person is incontinent, has a hard time getting up from a chair or getting into bed or buttoning their buttons. It's very laborious physically. So we all need to know that it's okay to, not only is it okay to course correct and have backup plans or secondary plans, but expect to need to course correct. If your plan is to keep mom home with no help for the rest of her life, that might happen, but then again, it might not. So expect and don't feel like it's a failure. In Dr. Peter Raymond's and Nancy Mace's book, The 36-Hour Day, he and she talk about how a lot of families feel like it's a failure if they can't keep that person at home. And it's just not. It's next to impossible for most families. They just don't have the resources of former First Lady Nancy Reagan. So in summary, Cruz, caregiving is tough. But if you reframe it that I'm choosing to do this for my loved one, this is something that I want to give that person. Recruit. You want to recruit people that love you, that love your loved one, or that care about them, and that want to contribute. You want to try to understand what your loved one's condition is and apply that knowledge when you're interacting with them. Integrate caregiving. If caregiving is the only part of your life that you have, then you're going to be having a lot of challenges, because ultimately people that have irreversible dementias pass away. And if that's the only thing you have in your life and you don't keep up with your friends, you don't keep up with your hobby, you don't keep up with your own health, what do you have when your loved one passes away? Not only will you be grieving the loss of your loved one, but your life will be no longer what you want it to be. Partner with the senior care system, do good research, or assign that to one of your caregiving crew members. Know that they're not going to be perfect, but it's about finding the right fit for you. And expect the need to course correct. Course correcting is not a failure. It should be, in many cases, expected. The voyage, a lot of people call it a journey. I call it a voyage. Caregiving voyage can be long. When my grandmother broke both of her shoulders many years ago, and she was immobilized for 4 weeks, my aunts and I, we made a commitment that we would be her arms and her hands and her shoulders for 4 weeks. She wouldn't be without one of us for that whole time. But it was only 4 weeks. In many cases, in almost every case with Alzheimer's disease, you don't know how long the voyage is going to be. If it's 2 weeks or 6 months, we know that this is how long the person's going to need help. A lot of us can wrap our head around that. But when the person could live for 6 months, 2 years, 10 years, 15 years, it's exhausting. It's psychologically and physically exhausting. The voyage is long. The voyage is long, but wherever your stress level is today, you can bring it down. If you're at a 70 today, you can bring it down to a 60. If you're at a 50 today, you can bring it down to a 40. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. We're going to keep the chat line open for a little bit, to feel free to write in any questions. We do have a little bit more time, but caregiving is no vacation. We know that. But if you want to, and if you're intentional, you can cruise more smoothly through the process. Thank you all so much. And please feel free to write in any comments, any questions, and we're going to turn it over to Artis Senior Living. I will stay on, though, to answer any comments or questions folks have.
Thanks, Jen. I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Thank you for all of our attendees for joining us. We will be having some more webinars in the months to come. If you are interested, you can find us on our website through our events page, and we'll be happy to send you the recording of this webinar once it becomes available. And we'll follow up if there is anyone interested again in learning more about our new memory care community opening up later this fall. Please feel free to reach out, and have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Max. Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks to Artis Senior Living for this evening's great program with lots of helpful information. Again, if you have a question or a comment you'd like to ask Jennifer in the next few minutes, please feel free to do so. I've also put in a link to a survey that should take about 30 seconds. If you want to cut and paste that into your browser, we'd be most appreciative. So thank you so much. I hope you all have a wonderful and safe evening. Take care. Again, thank you so much for attending this evening's program. We've put the link into the chat section, so feel free to cut and paste it. If you can please just do that and give us a little bit of feedback, we'd be most appreciative. Again, thank you to Artis Senior Living of Potomac for sponsoring this evening's program. Have a wonderful evening.